This year, U.S. corporate debt skyrocketed to a staggering $47.8 trillion, with unsecured corporate bonds, those risky bets with no collateral, are driving a 9.2% default risk. It's the highest since the '08 crisis. But closer to home, a hidden scam is bleeding homeowners dry. School bonds, bloated by appraisal fraud and unchecked financial engineering, are piling unpayable debt onto taxpayers, potentially triggering foreclosures and a municipal meltdown that could dwarf the last crash. Today, we're joined again by Mitch Vexler, the real estate developer, president of Mockingbird Properties, and a relentless whistleblower who's filed criminal complaints against districts like Denton for inflating home values to fuel a $5.1 trillion school bond Ponzi scheme. Mitch, welcome back, and I say thank you on behalf of all my viewers for exposing what could be the biggest financial fraud of our time. Welcome back.
Thank you for inviting me back. There's a fair amount, as you've just seen in the last 2 days, to go over in some of the documents, especially the one that I just wrote called Terminal Failure. And it's a very harsh dose of reality in that when we utilize the bond rating agencies' own criteria for what is AA, AAA ratings, that criteria is completely useless. And it has been seen as useless as recently as Tricolor Auto. And
Yes.
the criteria itself is incapable of detecting the fraud. So what I did is I broke down EBITDA, which is used by Wall Street, but that is part of the financial engineering. EBITDA is a half-truth at best. And I've also looked at it from the standpoint of that's on the corporate side, but on the personal side, mom and pop side, residential side, and corporate property side, the mechanisms that are supposed to be used are not being used. USPAP and all those derivatives of USPAP, net operating income, debt to coverage service ratio, none of these items are being used. Well, if EBITDA is a half-truth and USPAP, Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, isn't being used, de facto, how could the credit rating agencies be accurate? And the answer is they aren't. When you have Tricolor that fails, couldn't detect the fraud. 2 days prior to it failing, everything was hunky-dory. 2 days later, Tricolor is gone. Chapter 7, finished, finito. What did they not detect? They didn't detect the multiple loans on every single car. The credit rating agencies got it wrong, and they're going to get it wrong here in unbelievably large proportions.
Wow. Well, okay, but why aren't they, and this may seem like a very silly question, but why aren't they using the mechanisms that would allow them to catch it?
Perhaps they don't want to.
Why?
Well, if you're a bank and you can produce a credit, the bank's credit is people like you and I, it's our debt. So the more credit that gets produced, the more rate of return in terms of interest on that outstanding debt, their credit, our debt, that they earn. The credit rating agencies, you've seen this in 2007, and that's really what I'm doing in this document. I'm tying all this back to 2007, AIG, WorldCom, Washington Mutual, and then bringing it current into today's world, saying, you've missed this time after time after time. And the point that I'm getting at is you, the credit rating agencies, have the job to do to rate these bonds. Well, it's the production of the bonds itself. So think about it. You go back to 2007, 2008, what caused the mortgage-backed security problem? It wasn't the mortgage-backed securities. It was the leveraging of the mortgage-backed securities based on no loan verification. It was the bonds that brought it down. Well, there is no difference between that and what we're facing right now today at the central appraisal districts across the United States. The value of the homes is not the value of the homes. It's the value of what they want it to be based on the predetermined budgets on behalf of the school districts. These two things are neck and neck. That's the point of this document. I'm literally correlating it back to 2008 and say you credit rating agencies are culpable in aiding and abetting a criminal conspiracy to defraud. You cannot get away from this math.
Whoa, let's stop here for just a moment because this is critical. When the next financial crisis hits, accounts will be locked just like 2008, and it will be too late to do anything about it. I've reported on global markets for over 20 years, and what's happening right now is unlike anything we've faced before. The window to act is closing fast, and the opportunity is now. That's why we've created the Private Wealth Playbook. It's free, and it shows you how to move into the proper gold and silver strategies, proven to protect and grow wealth when everything else breaks down. Don't wait until after the crisis hits. Click below or go to DannyReport.com and download the Private Wealth Playbook right now. Now back to the show. So let's take a step back because this is an important point, Mitch. So the big picture, right? U.S. corporate debt at $47.8 trillion with unsecured bonds, those with no collateral carrying a 9.2% default risk, or the level we haven't seen since the financial crisis. So from your work in real estate and bonds, how does this massive debt bubble amplify? Like, how does it tie back in, right, to maybe the people who didn't watch our previous two interviews? How does it tie back into the risks in municipal school bonds, which you've called a Ponzi scheme of biblical proportions?
You hit on the key word when you said no collateral. Well, according to the rating agencies, when you have AA, AAA, you're supposed to have collateral. But let's realize what that means. The school districts are using your house as collateral for their mortgage-backed bonds. So you see the problem? It's the collateral of your house. It's your ability to pay this off. Well, if 37% of the households, which is our number, is going to go bankrupt and or lose the roof over their head, recognize what that means. That's 42 million households across the United States are in harm's way of bankruptcy or losing the roof over their head. What collateral? They can't pay. The median household income doesn't exist. And if you take it to its extreme, which is the reason we're doing this so we don't see that extreme, can you imagine what will happen if a school district and or government entity shows up in mass to take over an entire subdivision of defaulted houses where the homeowners can't pay? Do you understand? By definition, that's an act of war. That's the problem. That's where this ends up. So the rating agencies are completely oblivious to the fraud. But you cannot, and this is the part of the problem.
Yeah.
They have made your property, be it commercial and or housing, their payment of their credit card. Their credit card is a fraud. We've asked time after time for any school district to give us what the outstanding principal cumulative of the outstanding bonds is and the cumulative compound interest on that outstanding bonds, just as a gross number. And they can't do it. The EMA, which is the site that is allegedly tracking a lot of these bonds on behalf of the rating agencies across the United States, it can't do it either. So all these school district superintendents, when they sign off that says, well, we need bonds to pay for these schools, do you realize that there's not even a bid on those potential schools? There's no cost competitive bidding. They're making it up. So everything about this is fraud. For the school districts to say, well, we have these future tax receipts, that's not true. The median household income isn't there to support it. 37% of the population is in harm's way of bankruptcy. That's 42 million households. What are you going to do? Steal every house? De facto, act of war. So the point of the matter is, it's all a lie. And there is a fix, right? So the fix is you get the fraud out of the system. Well, the bill that I wrote for Helen Kerwin, Texas State Representative, outlines what is the fix for mom and pop. To restore the balance sheet to mom and pop, repeal all property taxes so that the houses no longer have the fraudulent debt, like in the case of Argyle, Texas, $343,000 per house. That simply disappears. Now, the bond issue, which is what we're talking about here, well, if I'm right on the math at 5.1 trillion, there's some debate on that because it's much larger, and I know that. But let's just go with the 5.1 trillion. So the 5.1 trillion, if you put a floor on it and put a ceiling on it and say, this is the fraud, We know that the outstanding school district bond debt, give or take, is around $7 trillion.
Right.
But you can say, okay, a certain portion is legit under USPAP, so we ran with that math. That leaves $5.1 trillion outstanding. If you look at that number and you simply say, that's the fraud, how are we going to get rid of it? Well, de facto, you take the school district's balance sheets and you strip out all the nonsense. You strip out the interagency loans, you strip out the INS and the O&M being commingled, which is a violation of law. You strip all that out and you come back down to a cash basis operation. Isn't it interesting when you get to a cash basis operation, the school districts really don't need federal funding. They really don't need state funding. All of that funding is the fraud. When you get down to a cash basis operation and you strip all this crap out of here, then the truth becomes evident. What the school districts are doing is they're running their operations for the sole purpose of obtaining federal and state funding. Then you would say, well, what do they do with that? There's the $99 question right there.
And you have a whole list of questions that we should be, I mean, that's a whole separate segment in itself. What
Right.
do they do with it?
Yeah.
What are they doing with it?
You have a compound circular argument that's occurring here. And the compound circular argument is every year that your property taxes go up, they generate more tax revenue. And the school districts, by virtue of the fraud, believe that that is their money to spend. So they go and order all sorts of things that the taxpayers aren't even aware of that they exist, i.e. the 313 agreements. Well, the 313 agreements fund solar fields. One of the questions that we've asked, Jeff Mashburn has done this multiple times and gotten zero response. How much revenue did any school district obtain back from any of these 313 or JEDI agreements? From what we can see, the answer is zero. Well, in the case of Taylor, Texas, which has just been on our target list over the last 10 days, isn't it interesting that Samsung received a 98% property tax reduction in perpetuity? Simultaneously, the Taylor School District, independent school district, turns right around to the taxpayers and says, well, we need $147 million to cover off new schools based on the 1,600 employees that are going to be brought in phase one for the new Samsung plant. Okay, let's get this straight.
Yeah.
Phase one is $10 billion in costs, new. And that school district never told the public, well, we're going to hit you for $147 million to build a school to hold 300 students. That's the math. 1,600 employees, approximately 300 students. Why in the world do you need $147 million for a school of so you see the problem? This
Yeah.
math is so far outside of the realm of reality, but that's the compound circular argument. Every time they lie, they get more money in, they spend that money, then the compound cumulative interest goes up on that principle, year after year after year after year.
And why does Samsung get such a break? How does that tie in, Mitch?
I don't object to an entity saying, we want a tax break. Okay, if you're doing something that's for the benefit of society, I get it. But there's other problems under the hood. There's something called uniform and equal. In California, it's the Board of Equalization. It doesn't matter. One corporate entity, doesn't matter who it is, should not have a better advantage over another corporate entity. No single-family homeowner should have, according to law, a better advantage over another single-family homeowner. That law is straight across the board. So why are they getting that type of tax break? A 98% tax break. Now, they're going to build, give or take, from front to back, roughly $50 billion, according to their pro forma. That doesn't mean they have to, but it's rigged such that a 98% reduction, even if they stopped at phase one with a $10 billion investment, understand that $10 billion isn't even their money. The federal government put in $6.5 billion.
Wow. Yeah,
So when you start breaking this down and realizing these people are spending money, A, they don't have, B, in terms of the bonds, these credit rating agencies couldn't be more wrong. They're completely out in left field. And the public is totally unaware of all of this. Public doesn't know about the 313 agreements. They don't know about the future bond raises. Well, we're going to have to pay for these schools somehow. California, when you look at what's going on there, so along the Pacific Coast Highway, 3 schools burned. They want to replace the schools, okay? Except there's no mention of the insurance policy on the schools that burned. They literally turned right around to the tax holders and said, yeah, we're going to take more money from you, except there's a whole bunch of houses that aren't there to generate the taxes. They're not issuing any more building permits. Oh, well, so what's the bond rating for that area? The bond ratings on the school district bonds, as we've shown in this document, the bond ratings are sub-junk. They're calling it AA and AAA. This stuff is bankrupt. It is literally sub-junk. Public is unaware.
Where are the journalists? I know I'm happy you're on my show, but I'm like, how isn't this story being told? Let's get back. I have a question about appraisers here and how they play in. Why the immense pressure and where is it coming from? Is it the bond issuers? Is it the banks? I mean, why can't the appraisers rise up, properly do their job? Why is it broken at the appraiser level?
Well, your question is really important. So why aren't the banks doing something? Who's to say that the banks and the shadow banks aren't one and the same? Who's to say that the banks, the shadow banks, and the bond underwriters aren't one and the same? So if you can generate fees as a bond underwriter, left hand of a shadow bank, you don't care about the profits. You don't care about the bondholders.
Right.
You're in for the
Yeah.
fees. And that actually does tie. So Jeremy Bagot, very interesting person, very smart, very shrewd, understands extremely well what happens at the appraisal level. Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, HUD. Do you know that they tell the appraisers, you will hit this number or you will never get another job from us, and we may fire you if you don't? Well,
Well, there you
they
go.
can't even do that under law, but nonetheless, that is what is happening. So when people say the value of this house, as an example, is $2 million, but $1 million of that $2 million was created out of thin air by virtue of the overvaluation and subsequent overtaxation at the request of the school district because they needed more money. It's all based on a predetermined budget. So you've got appraisers that are working for these CADs that should have their licenses stripped. The chief appraisers should be put in jail along with the school district superintendents because the school district superintendents are in fact creating accounting fraud and bond fraud. So it's a cacophony of idiots literally lying, creating false financial statements, passing it up the chain and saying, well, everything's fine because the credit rating agency said so. We get a rating of AA. How bad can this be? Well, the whole purpose of this document is to say, yeah, this is really bad. This is going to explode. And the credit rating agencies are culpable just like they were back in 2007 and 2008.
Wow. Okay. What's the latest on the judicial front? I know you're fighting this fight. Where are you at with your crusade now, Mitch? What's the latest?
The Texas Supreme Court has the amicus brief, and for everybody that's watching this, that amicus brief it's a piece of work. It's really good, and it's not that long, a little bit deep, but it outlines the problems across not just Texas, not just Denton Central Appraisal District, but in reality across the United States of America. So we're waiting for the Supreme Court of Texas to come back and say, yes, we agree to remand this case to the lower courts to be heard on its merits, which are fraud. And the lower courts agreed fraud has occurred. All we want is put this evidence on trial. And as I've said, they have no defense. One of the attorneys I spent an hour this week working that out, and I kept saying no defense. By the time I was done, he agreed, no defense. They'll come up with something. It'll be a lie. But that's fine. That opens up Pandora's box for us to do other things. But the point of the matter is that's what we're waiting for. Ideally, we want this remanded. However, we're also in the process right now of working through a model to do what's called class action lawsuits. And we warned of this in that amicus brief, because regardless of what I'm doing, everybody, by virtue of this fraud and everything we're outlining, they will have the right to start filing class action lawsuits across the United States. We believe we've got the formula necessary to do that on a website. We're working on it. It sounds easy, but it's a fairly difficult thing to do because of the databases that are required. But if mom and pop could literally find a website, our website, that says you put in your address and up comes how much money is stolen from you in the last 5 years, and here's how much money is going to be stolen from you in the next 6 years based on the CAS trajectory, you all of a sudden get to see exactly how bad this is. And that's what spins all the class action lawsuits.
And we're going to fire up its Mockingbird properties, and Mitch just has a ton of free information for you. I mean, Mitch, obviously, I would think there's a lot of people who want you stopped. Have you received any emails saying you need to kind of stop this crusade?
No, actually, no. And when you think it
Okay.
through, the school superintendents get paid a lot of money. The average salary is between $343,000 and $500,000 just here in the state of Texas. So they get paid money to steal your money. So the school district superintendents don't want this because I'm calling for them to be put in jail. Chief appraisers don't want this because I'm calling for them to be put in jail. But the reality is, everybody would argue against this type of position. So you would say, well, the teachers argue against it. Well,
Right.
they don't. But let's talk about the teachers for a second.
Yeah.
Do you realize and think this through? What makes you think that the teachers themselves aren't being defrauded? So the
Well, that's
teachers
what I
have
think. Yeah.
they have hidden investment pools inside the balance sheets that we've found. So if you're a bond underwriter and you create these false bonds and you want to move these false bonds, these fraudulent bonds, what better place to stick them than sell them back to the teachers themselves in their pension fund, which is in the hidden investment pool? Think that one through. That's how twisted this is.
Oh my
So the
gosh.
point of the matter is the teachers themselves are getting ripped off. So if you had the opportunity to explain this, say, listen, you've got a problem here. Your operations are creating fraudulent bonds. You sold these fraudulent bonds under the auspices that this stuff is AA rated or AAA rated, and it's not. It is literally sub junk. The real value is somewhere between 13 and 30 cents on the dollar to allow this stuff to be paid off. Well, take it to its next level, and they say, well, we're going to keep raising these bonds in perpetuity. Well, that's great, except that the median household income doesn't exist to pay them off. And that's why I'm calling this document terminal failure. You're there right now. That money doesn't exist.
Terminal failure. Um, like I said, I invite everyone to go to Mitch's website to get the full story. And we've done 2 other interviews, and I'm going to keep inviting Mitch back to give us these updates. I think you sum it up perfectly when you say we're sitting on the ultimate house of cards. I guess to give a big picture of what it means for the economy, Mitch. Why is it the ultimate house of cards perhaps in history right now?
The 2007, 2008 crash never went away. It was never fixed. So you have what's called in math the rule of 72, which basically says that every 5 to 7 years, depending on the interest rate, the outstanding debt is going to double. 2007, 2008 to where we are today, except that, yes, it has doubled, but no, it's actually gone up 5x. But the leverage of the principal going up 5x is up over 60x. It's the leverage. It's the bond leverage. When you take fraud and you leverage it through the bonds, and that stuff splatters all over the place, right? Because every pension fund, every bank, every 401k, they have some portion of the school district debt, bond debt, in their portfolios. The spider web is absolutely massive. So it's not a stretch to say 2007, 2008 period, with all these other entities that went broke for the exact same reason, which is the bond ratings. Nobody detected the fraud until it was after the fact. So the bond ratings is what did it. Well, now multiply that problem times 60. Because this is not just the real estate. The real estate was the mortgage-backed securities. Now, think this through for a second. This problem here and now is the mortgage-backed securities, it's the real estate. But it's also the compound cumulative effect of the outstanding bonds of the school districts. And how many houses and how many properties across the United States does that touch? Give or take 98%. That's how big this is. That's why you've got 60x easy over and above 2007, 2008. The only way that this can be dealt with is for the state and the federal government to sit down and say, we have got a huge problem. Let's put a bracket, a floor and a ceiling on this debt, and let's start peeling this stuff back for real. Let's peel back the fraud. The value is the value. The fraud is where the problem is. The bond ratings are fraudulent. And it's easy to say that because if the bonds under the hood were created by fraud, fraudulent real estate tax, fraudulent overvaluation, that means that the bonds themselves are fraudulent. If the bonds are fraudulent, then clearly the credit ratings must be fraudulent. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. End of story. The bond ratings are what is going to cause the collapse.
If I were to ask you today, your gut, how optimistic are you that we'll get that floor put in?
Truthfully, I'm not, but we have to do what we have to do in order to try to force these entities, be it the state and the federal government, to sit in a room, such as what happened with Hank Paulson and Bernanke.
Right.
You've got to get in a room with serious people that understand this math and say, we've got a huge problem here, because it's bigger than even they realize, in that the US dollar is at risk because a dollar is nothing more than an IOU. It's an item of credit. Well, if your credibility is shot because you allowed this fraud to continue, think of what's going to happen globally. You got US treasuries at risk here.
Do you think Powell knows of the work you're doing? I know you're very connected, Mitch. Do you think you'll have that opportunity?
I doubt it. Powell is the wrong person. Jerome Powell is an attorney. This is beyond an attorney. This is beyond a government. This is beyond the state government. This takes serious people that truly understand the math. Proving the law is a piece of cake. We've got that dialed in. We also have the math dialed in because we've been on this for so long. But I don't know what they know, but from what I see in the ramifications at the moment, the DOJ's got full-blown criminal complaints. There's roughly 35 complaints that have been filed across the United States on this issue. So it's not that the DOJ and the FBI don't know, it's who it leads to.
Right.
So it's a very confusing thing. You look at the Attorney General here in Texas, his name is Ken Paxton, and Ken Paxton has done some good things. Governor Abbott has done some good things. There's no doubt about it. But when you push this issue in front of them, which we have done,
right,
through the Freedom of Information Act, literally 10 days ago, we got a response from Ken Paxton that said, we're not the repository of the documents, and we have the evidence that he's got the documents. They don't want to hear this, but that's the problem. That's why we have to keep pushing.
They don't want to hear it. Why? It's too much to handle. They don't feel like dealing with it.
Because it's going to come down to their legacy, and unfortunately, their legacy is about to get destroyed. They were in tenure when the school districts for the state of Texas would have to start filing bankruptcy like flies dropping out of the sky. That's what's going to happen. These school districts are bankrupt. Just because you have bonds floating you today doesn't mean you're going to have bonds floating you tomorrow. These credit rating agencies, by the time this comes out with your video, they're going to start backing up and saying, holy crap, we don't want to be liable for this.
Right. No, this is terrifying. I hope this video and our past two get seen. I know the first one went viral, and I hope millions of people will watch this, Mitch. I completely off topic, but I'd love to get your thoughts. I know you've spoken about owning gold, and it's probably one of the only great things you can own during this House of Cards fiasco. Just on your thoughts on gold hitting a record high here, and what it signifies.
Just yesterday, I became aware of a public company, house builder. They jettisoned 100 lots at 10 cents on the dollar. Now, these houses were not finished, so yes, there's an extreme discount, but The buyer looked at it and said, well, okay, I'll buy these lots based
Yeah.
on prior value. I'll take the chance of rebuilding these houses to finish them. But why did the builder jettison the lots? The builder, the original developer, couldn't afford to pay the real estate taxes and it couldn't afford to pay the interest carry. Okay? Now, think that through on a much larger scale. If you're in real estate and you're not buying your assets where you have a true margin of safety, you're going to get killed. You're going to end up with property devaluation, principal devaluation. You don't know it, but the day you sign off and say, oh, I just bought this property today at the high end of the market with all the shenanigans going on under the hood, the probability of you losing principal is extremely high as compared to that 10 cents on the dollar buy that this new home builder is stepping in just acquired. Well, so take that to your question on the gold. Where exactly are you going to hide? You need a company that's generating cash flow. That's a good place to hide. That doesn't have debt. Very good place to hide. If you have real estate that's generating cash flow without debt, because if you've got debt, you don't know who your bank is in business with. They've cross-collateralized each other's loans, which is another reason why the AA and AAA ratings are complete nonsense, because they didn't even do the due diligence on that. So you have to look at it. I, as an investor, have to stand alone and stand away from this crowd, because this crowd is about to get run over. Whether I'm doing this or not, that's just what the math is. So where are you going to hide? Well, Bitcoin is running for a very specific reason, as is gold, as is silver, even platinum is starting to move up. But I expect within the next day, maybe even starting today, gold will, in trading, you have what's called 10 bars, 2 legs, sideways to down. And I expect that to be a pullback. So you get a downdraft, a little bit of a
Yep.
pullback, pull up, another downdraft, and then it starts taking off again. Why? Because there's nowhere else to hide. If you don't have that cash flow without the debt, you've got problems coming your way. And anybody that says, well, my portfolio is only like 1 or 2% of the bonds, school district bonds, even that 1 or 2% is a problem, because look at it this way. If that school district goes broke, what are the ramifications in society? Who's going to end up building new schools? Where's that cash going to come from? Now, we have the answer on the cash that's in the bill. But the point of the matter is there's a trickle-down problem here. And I saw your interview with Joel Littman. Joel's smart, and he's got his sub-data, his subcategory data dialed in. But there's a problem. The problem is, add into what he's done the fact that 42 million households are in harm's way or bankruptcy. That 42 million households is the U.S. economy. It's not distinct from saying, well, all these corporations over here are doing well. That's not the U.S. economy. I agree. That's corporations. They're going to do what they're going to do, and they're going to get the money the way they're going to get it. But de facto, all those people, that 42 million households, people get laid off. They lose their jobs. They lose the houses. They can't go to restaurants. They can't buy cars. You see the trickle-down effect? It touches everything. You destroy mom and pop, de facto, you destroy the U.S. economy. And that's the point.
And it's interesting you bring up that Littman interview, because when he was speaking and making that point, I swear I thought, man, I wish I had Mitch Vexler on the other screen. Maybe we can make that happen, where I have a Littman
He's
Vexler.
good. He's good. He's got it dialed in. But there's just that one point that's missing. And when you add that into the equation, if he went back and ran his math, he'd probably be ducking under the desk as well, just like I am.
Yeah, I always say Joel's one of the most brilliant people I've met. I don't agree with him on certain aspects and points he makes, but he makes me see a different side to things. So that's why I love speaking with him. Mitch, keep doing the great work. People appreciate it so much. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of emails I received saying, please keep bringing Mitch on. He's doing God's work. And I always say, you don't need to be doing this.
No.
But you're fighting for mom and pop, and that's.
I know what it means. I understand extremely well. I left the country over this, as you well know. It's the exact same reason. A guy like me didn't fit in there. And I've done things here that I could never have done had I stayed there. But this is where we are. I mean, the United States is on its way to turning itself into Canada, and it's got to stop because you're going to
It's not
destroy the
crazy.
real economy, which is mom and pop.
Well, I was going to say, and do you fit in now in the US? The answer is no, you don't,
Yep.
Mitch. Where are you going to go to next?
No, this is it. This is when we're drawing a line in the sand.
All right. Keep us updated, please.
Perfect. I thank you very much.
I thank you, Mitch, and go check out Mitch's website, Mockingbird Properties. Like I said, there's a ton of information there, and people can reach out to Mitch. I'm sure your mailbox has just been filled to the rim. Thank you again, and thank you all for watching. And I am honored to be doing this work and bringing voices like Mitch to you. We mentioned gold. As always, if you're thinking about starting your journey in precious metals, reach out to my wonderful colleagues at ITM Trading. There's a link below. Tell them I sent you. They'll take extra great care of you. And subscribe to our channel so we can keep bringing you this content. Thanks for watching. I'm Daniela Cambone. We'll see you soon.